Is Elon Musk stealing from index funds? Should you and your spouse live off of one income? Are you a big dum-dum if you pay off your 2.5% mortgage? Let's find out. Welcome back to the Personal Finance Club show. Hey, Jen.
Jeremy, I have a hypothetical money question for you.
I love it. Give it to me.
If you had unlimited, I know you're a millionaire, but if you had unlimited money, what's the first completely unnecessary thing you'd hire someone else to do for you?
Oh, man. I think about this all the time because I am at a place where I am comfortable. I know a lot of rich people say like, oh, are you rich? Like, oh, I'm comfortable. And that's kind of how I feel, which is, I'm not fly private rich. You need like hundreds of millions of dollars to like buy a plane and maintain it. And so I think, but I am like, don't need to check the prices at the grocery store rich, which is great, by the way, because I used to not be. Mm-hmm. And not worrying about your grocery bill is an incredible, financial place to be in. And I highly recommend it. But then I think I'm like, do I have enough? Is there ever enough? Like, what would I buy? And I think, when you say completely unnecessary, the thing that jumps to my mind is I would want to buy like, maybe it's one person, maybe it's multiple people, but a personal chef and nutritionist who like do my macros and make like incredible food. And because sometimes I eat like a vegetarian or vegan meal, I'm like, this is insanely good and so healthy. And
yes,
I just don't have the bandwidth or the knowledge or the cooking skill or whatever to make this happen for myself on a regular basis. And also like when I'm like working out and trying to like, build muscle or whatever, I'm like trying to hit macros. Like macros are, if you don't know, it's like how much protein you're getting, how much carbohydrates, how many fats, and doing that in a healthy way. And if someone's job was just to like put a meal in front of me 3 times a day, that's like delicious and hits these macros, that would like be amazing.
Wow, that's actually a really good answer. That's such a good answer. I feel like mine's gonna be inadequate because this makes me think of, I saw an ad of Natalie Portman the other day and she looked amazing. And I think she's vegan or something ridiculous, like maybe even raw vegan or something crazy. And I was like, how does she look like that outside of like the plastic surgery that I'm sure all these celebrities do? But I'm like, yo, she probably has the craziest nutritionist ever to make sure she gets everything she needs, even being like a crazy raw vegan or whatever it may be. So that's a really good answer.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I do kind of like, I always, with celebrities, I always like wave my hands. I was like, oh, they just threw money at the problem. But still, they're just like humans making decisions.
Yeah.
Like all us, like I feel like Oprah has gone through like weight gain and weight loss things. I'm like, she has as much money as Oprah and, still has like to decide like what she eats and things like that. So I do feel like to some degree, there's like some hand waving, oh, rich people can just make it work. But I also think like you have to give them credit. Like, okay, Natalie Portman is doing the work and doing the workouts. You
still have to be disciplined or else everybody would look good. And there's celebrities that do not look good.
100%, right? So what is yours? If you had unlimited money, what's the unnecessary thing you'd hire someone to do?
Mine is not even fun. I think I would literally just have someone clean my apartment weekly.
I don't think you need unlimited money for that. I think you need like $800 a month for that or something.
I would just like not clean ever because I hate cleaning. And I would just pay someone to clean up after me.
Yeah, no, the thing is, once it's weekly, we don't have weekly, by the way, we have monthly at my house, but once it's weekly, you really want like daily. You're like, okay, well, actually, I never like doing dishes.
I don't even want to like put dishes in the dishwasher, bro.
But when I do that thought experiment, I'm like, well, do I really want some stranger here? Like in my, I don't want to put him in the dishwasher or take him out of the dishwasher. I hate the entire process. It's just like this never ending work.
Alexa's already here. Some stranger can be here, you
get over that. I feel like that'd be the thing is like, I would just want to like lay on the couch and watch TV while like some stranger I'm paying is like doing dishes. I was like, I don't feel great about that.
You're this millionaire just watching somebody clean your house.
Exactly. It's like feels so incredibly douchey. First world, it's beyond first world. It's like, billionaire problems, but
yeah.
Well, one day. All right, Jen. Oh, and I have one more question for you. You were recently in Kenya for what, 2.5 weeks or something?
Yes. I'm severely jet lagged.
Okay, well, hopefully you can stay awake for this episode. But how we talked about the flights were very expensive, but you said when you go there, you're going to spend like $200 for this entire trip. Like, do you have a sense of how much you actually spent on this vacation? Like,
girl,
outside
I was
of flights?
thinking about you because I was like, I totally blew the budget. But part of it is because my parents built a house. So usually we stay with my grandmother. My dad's like compound. There's so many traditions. Like my grandmother still lives like in Western Kenya, a very rural village. So there's like the eldest son doesn't actually live on the compound. The other sons can. So my dad built a place across the path essentially. And so I'm used to just being like, I'm the baby and I just don't pay for anything. But like with our own place now, we like went for groceries and I didn't want to make, even though like I'm there as the daughter, I didn't want to make my mom pay for everything. We bought a fridge. So like that was my gift, like kind of my housewarming gift. Granted, it was like $400 instead of like whatever fridges are in the US, probably like
Yeah.
1500 or something. Like if you want a good one, then like, so it wasn't a lot, but I still like was like, I bought a fridge. We bought like housewares. I was just trying to like help out because it was like,
Yeah.
oh, like I'm not just gonna go to the grocery store with my mom every other day and be like, yeah, you got it, right? So like I completely blew my budget and I was like so ashamed. I was thinking about you every step of the way, like, oh
Oh,
God,
that's
Jeremy would be so
okay. That
disappointed.
seems like a good use of money, though. You don't want to go there and be a freeloader, and
I know.
that's
But
that's
normally
what
I'm
life's
just like the
about, though.
baby. I'm like the granddaughter even, like where they're just like anything you want, you know? I'm like I feel
I
like the
know.
Queen of Zamunda there and like this time I was like, dang, I gotta be an adult. Like,
I think I was in like my mid 30s when I like stopped sitting at like the kids' table at Thanksgiving. I was like, oh yeah, I probably am not. I'm probably not like the youngest generation anymore.
yeah.
Grandparents are
I'm
my
like,
age.
I'm turning 40 this year. I guess I'm not the
Yeah.
baby anymore.
Yeah, you might need to pull your own weight. All
Dang.
right.
So yeah, blew the budget. I have to. I actually kept some of my receipts because I want to like ballpark how much I actually did spend. Because outside of that, there weren't very many big expenditures. But like, yeah, just helping out here and there for the most part. Like honestly, I didn't have to, but I'm getting older and like it was a very different experience having our own place there. It was like
Yeah.
I felt like being here, like it would be like me being like, I'm not paying for that. Like who's paying for it then? You know?
Makes sense. All right, nice. Well, speaking of paying for things, should we like learn about money and get into the show? What's our first
Let's
segment?
do it. We switched things up. So we're starting with Scroll Patrol.
Scroll Patrol. I just thought
Wow.
like everyone loves Scroll Patrol, and we want to start off after we've been like going over vacations for the last 20 minutes. We got to start the show off with a bang. So
Yeah.
this is a video that Jen has curated from the internet that I have
Yep.
never seen before, and I will be watching live and reacting.
Yes, let's watch it together.
How much do you think it takes per year to have 4 kids with a stay-at-home wife?
$100,000. If you do the math on that, you're talking $6,000 a month, probably coming in, maybe 5 if you're high taxes in California, and you have a reasonable mortgage. That's $2,000 a month. You got $3,000 a month to play with to cover food, utilities, insurance, a little bit of fun money.
For 4 kids?
What do kids actually need? Maybe formula, diapers, and basic clothing. We don't need to take them all to Disney every year. We're just making sure that they're fed, they're growing properly, they're healthy. That's about it.
Okay, actually, I think this is the first time this has happened. I've seen this clip already. I just happened
Oh,
to like,
have you? Okay. This
yeah.
actually came as a suggestion from one of our followers, Natalia in Maryland. And once you review, I'll give some context that she gave to me
Okay.
after. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I actually know both of these people. I've talked to, well, this is Graham Stephan, and this is George Camel, who's like part of the Ramsey. He's a Ramsey personality. I don't know. I mean, just like we're content creators, like they're this like much bigger content creation network. And
Calling me a content creator is very kind.
we're currently see that
I
red
have 4
circle above our
followers.
pictures. We're currently creating content.
I have 4 followers.
But you're part of Personal Finance Club, and we have 1 million followers, Jen.
Oh, we.
Yeah,
The royal
we have 1 million
we.
followers and 3 podcast listeners, which is why we spend all the time on the podcast. Yeah, but so it's Graham Stephan's basically saying, how much do you think it takes per year to have a stay-at-home wife and 4 kids in California, which is rough. Although California is a big place, and so I
Right.
think there are like parts of California like very far from the Pacific Ocean where it's like middle America, and George is basically saying about $100,000. I can't really make a assessment of that. I haven't like done a deep study on cost of things. I know like my own personal experience, like things get a lot more expensive when you have a family and kids because you have like 4, in this case, 6 people trying to spend money. I do think that like kids aren't always necessarily super expensive. Like I guess if you have a stay-at-home spouse, the the implication is child care is not an expense, which is a huge one.
Right.
Um, you know, food you kind of do have some economies of scale where, when like my two kids are eating, it's like, it's kind of like rounding error. But if you're like ordering food from a restaurant, you kind of do have to order an extra meal.
Mm-hmm.
So food does go up a little bit. And then, housing, I don't know, like our kids, we have a 4-bedroom, but our kids share a bedroom. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you could potentially have a 3-bedroom with like 2 kids each and the 2 bedrooms and parents in one. So like, I think, George is potentially right, but I think that would be a pretty frugal living in much of California.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to like rate this. I feel like maybe Graham is, a bigger spender and he's a little more skeptical, and George is saying like,
Right. That's my question is like, they're not living like that, but I guess like it's like what you have to do. But also I want to give the context from Natalia. She says, I have 2 kids, both my husband and I work. We live about 15 minutes outside of DC and we pay almost $50,000 for daycare and our mortgage is 4,000. So even if I was a stay-at-home mom, 100K would not touch our expenses.
yeah, I mean, if you're a stay-at-home mom though, I think the point is like that 50K for daycare is crazy. I guess if you're hiring a nanny, then that's about right. If you're paying that for an actual daycare outsource, that sounds like pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming you're staying home mom, then the 50K would go away, right? You wouldn't have a
Right.
daycare expense. The mortgage is real, 4K, but that's like that's my mortgage is less than that. Although I guess we have a big down payment. George saying a $2,000 mortgage is like, okay, $2,000 mortgage isn't going to buy much house these days. But to Natalia's point and to my point, like I'm spending more than $100,000 these days, as it does sound like Natalia is. But
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, frugality still exists. Like you can still live a much more frugal life. You can like grocery shop at cheap grocery stores and make all your meals. It's like challenging, it's definitely more work, but I'd say, you know, what if it's two parents and they make $50,000 each? Like that exists somewhere. It's not like those people are destined for bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
I think making 100,000 is still like pretty good. It's more than the median household income.
Right.
So, I think a lot of us who are 6-figure earners and spending $50,000 in daycare and things like this, coming from a little bit of a perspective of privilege, it's like we're paying that because we can. To be a little bit transparent, like we have a nanny at my house. We pay someone to come to our house and help with the kids, and we have friends who send their like similarly aged like 1-year-old kid to a daycare, and we're looking at the daycare prices and it was like way less money. I was like, yeah, we could do that, but like, yeah, we don't really want to,
Mm-hmm.
because we're privileged because we don't need to. And so I think if you're trying, if you have less money, you're trying to make it, or I guess just all spending is like that. It can just so easily balloon to your level um, you know, of income. If you make 100, you spend 100. If you make 200, you spend 200. If you make
Right.
75, you make 75 work somehow. And that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
challenge of frugality in total, which is making 100 and living like you make 75, making 150 and living like you make 110,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easy to balloon your expenses because you're like, oh, well, we really prefer a nanny over daycare. You're like, well, a lot of kids go to daycare and live, very happy, healthy lives, and a lot of
Right.
daycares are great. And not that daycare is cheap either, but it's cheaper than a nanny, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think both. This is a very short clip, 30 seconds, and Graham just asks the question, and George just like gives his opinion on what things cost. It's like hard for me to say yes no, but I guess I'd give this like an A-. I think it's possible. I think that's probably possible in
Okay.
a lot of the country, and I think it's a good question to have. But I definitely think that once kids are involved, it becomes harder to be frugal because there's just now so many. When you're your own person, you're like, okay, I'm gonna get a roommate, I'm gonna drive a beater car, I'm gonna like not spend any of my
Mm-hmm.
own money, like that's fine. But then when it's like, okay, the kids, it feels like there's competing interests. You're like, you don't want to like risk their health or their safety or their education.
Right.
And so it becomes more difficult to be like, strictly stick to frugality. But yeah, A-.
Okay, okay. Let's move on to hot topics.
Ooh, we have a hot one this week. People have been
This
blowing up my inbox asking me about this over and over and over. And I think it's just because it's like got this really interesting blend of index funds, which they relate to me, and like, Elon Musk. And so what is the hot topic?
Yeah, you were chomping at the bit. You were in my DMs talking about, let's talk about SpaceX. So we're
Well,
going to talk about
because
the
this
SpaceX IPO. And you're going to tell me everything you know.
Okay. Well, because this episode is airing on June 11th, and the SpaceX IPO is scheduled for tomorrow, June 12th. And so, and there's basically this big hullabaloo right now. Hullabaloo, is that a word?
Hullabaloo.
Hullabaloo?
I
There's
think
a big
it's hullabaloo.
that basically this SpaceX IPO is this plot to steal money from index fund investors. And I think there's some credibility to that narrative. And so let's break it down. So first of all, SpaceX is this company that is like largely owned by Elon Musk that shoots rockets into space. Its big drivers of revenue are Starlink, which is basically internet access from low Earth orbit satellites, and rocket ship launches. And so a lot of companies will want to have a satellite in space to take photos of things or whatever their satellites do, and they'll go buy a little spot on one of Elon's rockets and they'll pay him, and then he'll put up. And it's like, like as a citizen of the Starship Earth in year 2026, it's kind of a little bit magical that we have like a private company like that's going public that shoots rockets into space. Like, this is crazy. Like what a world we live in. So let's get to the really depressing stuff now. So this is likely to make Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire with a T.
Woo!
And so I have a trivia question for you, Jen. How many zeros?
I think I saw your notes.
Oh, you saw it. Okay.
I saw it and I was like, no,
I should have blacked it out. I was thinking about that, but usually you said you didn't see it. But the question was going to be, how many zeros are in a trillion? Would you have known that if you didn't see the notes?
No, I don't. I would have had to take some time. But is it? Well, go ahead. You can.
Well, let me ask. Do you know how many zeros are in a million?
9.
No.
6.
Yes. And do you know how many zeros are in a billion?
So then 9.
9, and then a trillion is 12.
Yeah.
And so if you had $1 billion, how many billions would you need to get to a trillion?
How many billions do I need to get to a trillion?
Yeah.
10 billion.
No, 10 billion would be 10 billion. And it's not 100 billion. It's 1,000 billion. And so I think everyone kind of has a sense of how much money a million is. Like a million could buy like a crappy house in California, like a mansion in like a cheaper, like a million's a lot of money. If you had 1,000 million, like you got 1,000 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you count up to 1,000, that's a billion. It's an unfathomable amount of money. And then if you had 1,000 billion, that has a trillion. And so all these words rhyme, but they couldn't be more different. A million is like a kind of like tangible, large amount of money. A trillion is uncomprehensible. It's 1,000 millions to a billion, and 1,000 billions. You need 1,000,000 millions. So if you're a millionaire, and then you do it 1,000,000 times over, then you're a trillionaire. It's like,
you can do it.
Yeah. So if you're listening, maybe you out there, you can be the world's second trillionaire. I hope so. Probably not me. Probably not you. Probably no one listening. But it's a unimaginable scale. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, the allegation is he's going to become a trillionaire by robbing index funds, by all of us normal people who are putting away our $500 a month on our Roth IRA into VOO or SPY or our target date fund. He's going to rob that. How is he going to do it? Well, first let's talk, and this is going to get technical, so this might be like a long explanation. But I think it requires it. So it first requires understanding of what is an index. An index is a list of companies and their associated stocks. And so I'm going to use an example of the NASDAQ 100. NASDAQ, which is this Wall Street company, basically keeps a list of 100 companies. And the NASDAQ 100 is like NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla, all these big companies that trade on their stock exchange. And in order to get on this list, it's exactly 100 companies. So the question is which companies. In order to get on this list, you basically have to meet the qualifications for entry into the list. And so, for example, with the NASDAQ 100, it's big companies only. It's like the biggest 100. It's seasoned stocks only. So that it used to be the case that when a stock was listed, it had to be on the stock market for 12 months before it got added to this list, assuming it was big enough. And then it also is only companies that sell a minimum number of their shares. And so when a company goes public, like a company is private, like you and me, Jen, if we like started our own little bakery or something, we own 100% of it. But then we could go public, we could sell some of our shares on the open market. And as business owners, we get to decide what percent of our shares we sell. We wouldn't sell 100% of them because we want to keep some for ourselves or for the future or whatever, but we wouldn't sell like 1% because it wouldn't raise very much money. And the point of an IPO is IPO stands for initial public offering. Basically means when you start selling your shares publicly to the, on the open market. The point of an IPO is to raise money for the company to buy more, hire more employees, buy more bakery stuff, whatever. And the percent of your company you sell in the market is what's called the float. Basically, how many shares are floating out there in the market relative to still being held by the owners. And NASDAQ had a minimum float of 10%, saying, hey, if you don't at least sell 10% of your company on the market, we don't want you on our list of 100 because that's not a reliable list anymore because it's so few shares. So in the last few months, there's been this whole flurry of rule changes to these indexes, these lists of companies. And so, for example, the NASDAQ 100 made some big changes. They said, hey, for big companies, if you're going to land in the top 40 of our list, instead of waiting 12 months to be on the list, now you have to wait 15 days. So it used to be
that's quite
12
a jump.
months. Now it's half a month. And they said, okay, instead of needing 10% float, we're going to remove that requirement altogether and have no minimum. And in fact, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to multiply your weight. And so in addition to this index being a list, it's also a weighting. A weighting means how much of each company. And so for the NASDAQ 100, for example, instead of an equal weight of each one, it says we're going to have the most of the first biggest company. So right now, the first biggest company is NVIDIA. The second biggest company is Apple. Third is Google. Fourth is Microsoft. And so basically says, okay, NVIDIA is going to be 4%. Apple's going to be 3%. Google's going to be 2.5% or whatever. And they're saying, hey, if you offer so few shares that there's going to be very few, you're going to be very small on this list, we're going to multiply your weight by up to 3x to basically have it be a bigger percentage of our index, of our list. And, so from SpaceX's perspective, they're saying, hey, instead of waiting 12 months and actually not being on the list at all because of this float requirement, now they're going to be on in 15 days and actually be overweight relative to how many shares are out there being sold. And so that's it. It's just a list. Why this list matters? Well, you might know it because an index is a list, but an index fund is an investment made by normal people like you and me inside your own 401k or in an ETF or a mutual fund that is required to buy all the stocks on a specific list. And so, for example, if you go buy the ETF QQQ, that's a ticker symbol for an investment, that ticker symbol for that ETF is required to buy the shares of the NASDAQ 100 index. And so on June 12th, tomorrow, if you're listening on the day we release this, which of course we love you if you're one of our Thursday listeners, on June 12th, when SpaceX goes IPO, the clock's going to start to 15 days, which is going to take us to June 29th or something, depending if that's a trading day. I haven't looked into it. But on that day, 15 days after the IPO, then everyone who owns QQQ, some of that money is going to go and buy up shares of SpaceX. And here's the cynical take of what's going on. And this is I'm not going to say it's conspiracy theory. I think there's been some good journalism that's gone into this. But basically, SpaceX is a company that is not profitable. It's losing billions with a B, and we saw it's not even as big as trillions, but billions is a lot of money, billions of dollars per quarter. And it recently gobbled up XAI, which is Elon Musk's AI company. And XAI recently gobbled up X, formerly Twitter. And these were all cashless deals. Basically, the shares just got rolled up. And so now SpaceX isn't really just a rocket company. It's a rocket company that also owns XAI and X, which were massively losing money. And so there's big investors into XAI and the Twitter acquisition who put billions of their own dollars in, and they want their money back. And so the contention here is what's going to happen is tomorrow, the IPO is going to happen.
Mhm.
Then in 15 days, all the QQQ holders are going to be required to buy the shares. And because they're listing only 4%, they're kind of artificially keeping supply low. And because they're changed the rules to get SpaceX on QQQ, they are increasing demand. And Econ 101 will tell you if you have low supply and high demand, price goes up. For example, if everyone suddenly apples start to go extinct and everyone loves apples, like apples are going to be much more expensive at the grocery store, right? Whereas if apples are plentiful and everyone hates apples, they're going to be much cheaper. That's just what happens to prices. And so by lowering supply, by having only a 4% float, increasing demand by requiring index funds to buy them, that's going to create this really high price. Then when the insiders can eventually sell their shares, which the lockup period ends like some period after that, like, 3 or 6 months or something, then these insiders, these investors into these money losing companies can get all their money out basically from the index fund holders. And so, Jen, you personally, in your personal finance club 401k, this will be happening to you. You won't see it. You're not going to see SpaceX's name in there, but the share price of your index fund will be impacted by this whole process I mentioned. And it gets maybe even a little bit worse, which is NASDAQ has this weird conflict of interest here, which is they are the provider of the stock market, but they're also the keeper of this list. And usually the stock market provider and the list keepers are separate businesses that don't do business with each other. But the stock market business wanted to win SpaceX's listing. And so basically what may have happened was Elon or the SpaceX people might have gone to NASDAQ and said, hey, we will list with you for our what is likely to be the biggest IPO in history. But in exchange, go change your rules of your NASDAQ 100 so we can get on the list so that index fund, this whole low supply, high demand thing will happen and our investors will be able to get out for a much higher price. And NASDAQ basically was like, well, we don't really care about index fund buyers. We really care about our business, which is, being a stock market. And so they said yes. And so that's basically, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but that's kind of like the cynical take of what's going on here. Did that make sense, Jen? Because it's a little bit crazy technical Wall Street mumbo jumbo.
I think so. I think it makes sense.
Okay.
And it's not going like they chose NASDAQ bought this as opposed to, or is including space as opposed to like the S&P 500. Is that correct?
Well, that's a great question. So NASDAQ's competitor here is the New York Stock Exchange. And
Okay.
so Elon could have gone, I don't know if Elon does this himself or whatever, but Elon could have gone to NASDAQ and said, hey, we're choosing between you and the New York Stock Exchange, but if we go with you, we got to change the rules in the NASDAQ 100. And so the analogy I say is like, NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange are kind of like grocery stores. And inside the grocery stores, you can go in and buy items individually. The items in this case are stocks. But then right outside the grocery store, right in front, there are these index providers and say, so if I'm a buyer, I go up to the front of the grocery store and someone would say, hey, instead of going in and buying all the individual stocks yourself, here's a beautiful list that's already curated for you. And you can buy all these all at once. And I say, okay, great. That's actually much more convenient. I'll buy this fund, which has all the stocks inside, like basically a ready-to-go pre-made grocery cart full of all of the items inside. And so NASDAQ is both the grocery store selling the individual items, and they're the middleman reseller with the big list. S&P 500 is just the middleman reseller. They're just the list. And so the S&P 500 can basically pick items from the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. So they pick items from both grocery stores and give you one list, whereas NASDAQ is doing both. And so they have this kind of weird conflict of interest where they might change their rules for their grocery store or for their basket of stocks in order to get an exclusive item in their grocery store. Whereas the S&P 500 doesn't have that conflict of interest. They just maintain a list.
Okay. Gotcha.
your question is a really good one because, what about the S&P 500? And the NASDAQ isn't the only one that maintains an index. There's actually like 5 or so big index providers. They are NASDAQ, which is mentioned, the S&P, Standard & Poor's, which is mentioned. And these are basically, research data companies that track this stuff that have been around for a long time that, their whole job is maintaining these lists. What a weird job, right? There's also Dow Jones, which you've probably heard of. They have like the Dow Jones Industrial Index, which is a 30, but then they also maintain other indexes, which is like the Dow Jones Total Stock Market Index. And by the way, the S&P 500 is just a list, but there's investments that follow that list. So the investments are like VOO, IVV, SPY, ITOT, FXAIX. These are ETFs and mutual funds whose job it is just to follow that list. Dow Jones has a bunch of mutual funds and ETFs that follow their list, such as FSKX, SWSTX, IYY. If these ticker symbols mean nothing to you, that's okay. But if you're a familiar investor, you've probably heard of some of them, but they're very popular index funds that follow these lists. There are also a couple others like the FTSE, the Financial Times Stock Exchange, and the CRSP, which is the Center for Research in Security Prices, and they both maintain their lists. So the FTSE has certain ETFs that follow their lists, such as VT, VXUS, VTIX, and IWN, and CRSP has notably VTI and VTSAX. And so if you are a broad market index fund follower, you might be thinking, okay, what are my index funds doing? Are they going to do this weird SpaceX thing? And the answer is, sadly, probably yes. So for example...
So wait, I know there's crossover in NASDAQ and S&P. There's some companies that are in both. Is that going to happen with SpaceX? Will SpaceX be a part of the S&P 500?
So I know the terminology is getting crazier, but there's the 2 main stock markets, which is the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of indexes that track companies across all the stock markets.
Yeah.
And they all have different rules. And so right now, the S&P 500, to your question, has a 12-month waiting period.
Oh, so their rules haven't changed. Only the NASDAQ's rules have changed.
Well, that's the big question, because of these 5 big index providers, some have changed and some haven't. The S&P has not changed the rules yet as of the time of this recording, but they are considering lowering their waiting period. And so it's currently, I think, at 12 months, and they're considering lowering it to something less. The S&P also notably has a profitability requirement, which means they don't put companies on their list who aren't profitable, who are losing money. And all indications are that SpaceX is going to be losing money for some foreseeable future. As did Amazon for many, many years, as did Tesla for many, many years. And, there's two, you might be saying, oh, the S&P 500 is safe. But, look at Tesla, for example, or Amazon. Those companies lost money for years or decades and then became some of the biggest companies on earth. And only then did the S&P 500 buy in. And so by not buying unprofitable companies, you're basically potentially not buying companies when they're cheaper and riding them up until they become profitable, right? And so there's kind of 2 sides to that coin. And they're a little bit unique. Of the other 4 major index providers, the other ones don't have this profitability requirement. All that said, if you track all these indexes on top of each other, they basically look like one line. They don't vary much. It's not like if you only have profitable companies, you're getting a 30% return, and if you have unprofitable companies, you're getting a 3% return. It's not really that big of a deal historically. Is this going to change going forward with these like new mega big companies like SpaceX and Anthropic and OpenAI? They're going to have these huge IPOs. We don't know. So yeah, as it stands, Standard & Poor's will not include SpaceX for the foreseeable future. The S&P 500 will not. But VTI, if you're in VTI or VTSAX, they have, in 2017, they introduced a fast track rule where they can introduce a new company in just 5 days. So not 12 months or not 15 days, but actually 5 days. And this wasn't introduced in response to pressure from the SpaceX IPO. This was back in 2017, 9 years ago. I think SpaceX, if it existed, it was a much younger company then. And, their argument for that is, hey, our job isn't to decide good companies are bad or set up these very, kind of active sounding rules about who's included. Our job is to accurately reflect the market. And if there's a huge company that comes on the market, we would be doing a disservice to our, index followers if that company was excluded for some reason. And so we're fast tracking on just 5 days. And basically, if you are a small, mid, large, or mega cap company, they fast track you in 5 days. If you are a micro cap company, this is like a really, really small company, then you have to wait 20 days. Still pretty fast though, right? And so, and they did make one other change though, which was interesting. They used to require a 10% float. Remember the other issue of float? There's not just the waiting period, but there's the how many shares are you selling issue. Mm-hmm. They used to require a 10% float. This year in 2026, they changed that to now only require 10% or $3.3 billion of market cap. So they're basically saying, hey, if you're so big that you're offering billions of dollars of shares for sale, then we'll still include you. And so that does feel like it's a little bit in response to the SpaceX IPO, because SpaceX is expected to be about $2 trillion. And actually, I'm doing this math live right now. But if they sell 4% of their shares at $2 trillion, that would be 80 billion. And so, that $3.3 billion minimum flow requirement, they would be at 80 billion. They'd be like way over, right? Mm-hmm. And so, again, if you're like a cynic or, I don't need to be name calling here, but if you're someone who is naturally skeptical and suspicious of billionaires, probably rightfully so, and you're like, oh, they're probably trying to throw us under the bus for some reason, maybe rightfully so, you could look at the other indexes and say, hey, this has been going on for 9 years, this fast tracking in, and not because Elon asked them to, but because they're just trying to accurately reflect the market. And, the float rule, like, is that a big deal or is it okay because they have so much for sale? So anyway, the skeptics take is this is trying to throw index fund holders under the bus by requiring them to buy just 5 days in when prices are high and supply is low. And then, the original sellers can get out at much higher prices. The optimist take would say, hey, an index is not supposed to have an opinion. It's supposed to just get the companies on the market in the index relative to their market cap as quickly as possible. And it's going to continue doing that. And I'd say the rational take somewhere in between is looking at the impact of this, saying, hey, how big of a deal is this? QQQ is just 100 stocks. SpaceX is slated to be the 7th biggest stock on that list relative to the size of the company. But since it has such a low float, it's only going to make up about 0.5% of the fund. So if you have $100 in QQQ, only 50 cents is going into SpaceX. And QQQ is a very dense fund. It only has 100 stocks. If you have VTI, which is more like 4,000 stocks, even though SpaceX is a huge company, only about 0.1% of the fund will go to SpaceX. So if you have $100 in VTI, only 10 cents, a dime, will go to SpaceX. And so you could say, hey, the index is doing its job. The shares that are out there, like my 10 cents or my 50 cents, are going to go buy a little piece of this company that's magically shooting spaceships into orbit. And you could say, hey, hedge funds, traders, while they might be front running a little bit, trying to buy up shares in that first 5 days to go turn around to sell to index funds, they also don't want to lose money by having their competitors, the other hedge funds, traders, sell at a lower price than them. And so they're kind of just playing this middleman game too, and they are going to potentially accurately price the market based on the available information. And while it seems like these huge index funds, which do represent about half of shares held these days, are this massive force that are going to push prices sky high. When you look at the actual number of individual trades that happen on the market, less than 5% of them are from indexes. 95% plus are from active sources like active mutual funds or hedge funds or traders or whatever. And so most of the price discovery that's setting the price that index funds are going to buy in at are happening by traders trading with each other, not from the index funds actually making the purchase. And so, after all that long-winded explanation, my take is, hey, I still think I'm not doing anything different. If anything, the takeaway is I don't invest in small, narrow, tech focused ETFs like QQQ. I invest in broad market ETFs like VTI or VT, where a dime of my $100 is going to SpaceX, not 50 cents or more. And so, for me, I'm staying the course. I'm buying, holding, and I think things like this are often a distraction. Like should we vote? Should we like campaign for things that we care about and be like advocates for important causes? For sure, but individually with my money, I'm more concerned about just stacking up shares. I'm going to buy more shares today. I'm going to buy more shares before SpaceX, after SpaceX. I'm going to own and own and own more and more shares, and the market's going to do its work and continue to grow.
Mm.
Do you regret asking about this, Jen?
The regret? I don't know if it's regret, but I'm like, I'm that head exploding emoji right now.
Yeah. No, it's interesting stuff. And as you should, but like that Fidelity study said, the best investors are dead people and people who forgot they didn't count, because all this stuff that's for, I see a lot of sentiment like, I want to make a new index that's like the S&P 500 minus SpaceX, or I want to short SpaceX, and like any sort, I honestly just think that's such a waste of time. It's going to be a lot of effort. It's going to make very little impact. And if anything, you're probably going to end up with less money for trying to make like those active types of decisions. If you just focus on buying more shares and ignoring the news, you're probably going to get really, really rich doing it that way.
Nice. Okay, so we're staying the course. Surprise.
I know, boring. But you probably listen to the show because you hear this crazy stuff and you're like, is this the thing that's going to make Jeremy lose his hat and tell us to freak out? and this isn't it. One of these days I'm going to freak out. And when Jeremy's freaking out, you'll know it's time that you can freak out too, but not today.
Not yet.
You're going to look at I get a Schedule B on your taxes next year. I'm going to have no trades this year again, other than buying more shares.
We'll hold you to that. We'll ask you again after tax season next year.
I'll post it. I did last year.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
You don't post your taxes on your Instagram?
People don't even know anything about me. That's really the real tea.
Weird. You're on the Super Bowl. Don't act like you're this anonymous.
I was on the Super Bowl. Me and Bad Bunny. Okay,
right.
Let's move on to our next segment. Do you want to have your question answered on the show? Go to personalfinanceclub.com/ask. Can I ask a dumb one?
You're asking a smart question to a dumb dude. What do we have today?
We have an audio question.
Love those. I knew if we pushed through the audio questions, we had to get some. So thank you for your audio and video question askers.
Yes, this is from, they filled out the form and everything.
Amazing.
I'm like, could not be more excited. This is from Esmeralda. So let's listen to this together and then you can give us your thoughts.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Jeremy. So my husband just got a new job and he's going to go from making $70,000 per year to $120,000. I make about $105,000 and I've been living well below my means. And my husband was living fine within his means. So I'm trying to convince him to have us live off of just one of our income. Because if we do this for just 10 years and we save the difference, we would save $1 million in 10 years. And if we were to invest some of that, it would have even greater potential for growth. So my dumb question is, would we be crazy not to do this?
I love that question. Love the audio question. And, reminder, the dumb one is not the question. The dumb one's the person. It just, I think we named it one instead of, can I ask a dumb question? We need to leave that little bit of ambiguity. So it's not a dumb question. So awesome, Esmeralda. First, congrats, like a $50,000 pay increase for your husband is epic. Now you guys are both individually making six figures. Add up 120 and 105. By my math, you guys as a couple are making $225,000 of household income, which is incredible. It's in California. I don't know where in California you are, but in the Bay Area, that might not be high living. In parts of inland California, that would be extremely well off. But you're definitely doing well. And would you be crazy not to live off of one income? Well, first of all, you said you'd save $1 million in 10 years, and your math was like, okay, we're both making about $100K. We live on one, we invest the other. You got to pay taxes. By my math, your after-tax income in California is going to be about $163,000. And so if you live on half of that, you'd be living on $81,000 or $67.50 a month. We talked about this with the George Camel segment. Like, I don't know if you have kids or your age. Do we know anything about Esmeralda?
We don't know her age. This is
Okay.
all we've got is this audio question.
Okay. Well, we'll do our best. But 6750, like, can you live off of that? You said you're living well below your means, and that would be about half of your combined income now, and probably not that different from what you were making before the raise. And then you could invest the other half. If you did that, and again, I don't know all your numbers, but like, let's say you're starting from zero today and you invested 6750 in 15 years, you'd have $2 million. So you'd have more than $1 million, even though you said you'd save $1 million in 10 years. Not quite true, because you'd have less than that because of taxes. But if you invest that, you actually have more than that. 4% of 2 million is 80,000, which is about what you'd be spending that whole time. So basically, if you're starting from zero, which I doubt you are because you said you're living below your means, but if you were starting from zero, that means you could go from today to never needing to work ever again and maintaining your exact same like spending in 15 years. And it's going to be something less than that based on how much you've already saved. And so, to your question, are you dumb for not doing that? You're not dumb, of course. You're really smart. You guys are both crushing it. And my answer is like, it really depends on what you want. And if you both hate your jobs and you just want nothing more than to get out of the workforce, and you would rather like live on a rural farm in Southeast Asia and sell rice on the side of the street than work your horrible California day jobs, then yeah, you're dumb for not doing that. You should probably do that like right now and quit your job to not hate your life. If you both love your jobs, you're like, this is like a passion of ours and we're going to be working until we're 70 just because we love it, then no, I wouldn't be necessarily living a life of poverty now just so you could have more money later if you were going to work anyway. And the point is, you really need to, what I would do is I would sit down with your husband together and make a plan and say, hey, let's pull open the Nectarine calculator, you can go to hellonectarine.com and click money tools, or search, or just Google Nectarine calculator. You can type in your numbers. You can say, hey, should we live on 8,000 a month, 9,000 a month, 6,000 a month? You'll see what it does to your retirement age. You can say, oh, okay, I'm going to retire when I'm 55, 50, 49, 53, whatever it is. And then say, hey, what do we want more? Would we rather retire 5 years earlier? Or would we rather spend $2,000 more a month today? And there's no wrong answer, and I think that having that plan and putting it out like that, my wife and I do that. And sometimes we get like really excited. We're like, hey, like we can spend like $2,000 more a month on whatever we want. And then we bought like a fancy coffee table that has this like epoxy river running through it. And it brings us joy. I know it's stuff that I would never have spent money on before in my entire life. And now is like these crazy expenses, but like we can afford it. And, we made that trade-off. And so, like I sometimes say, there's no reward given to the richest person in the cemetery. If you die with 10 million or 50 million, I consider that to be like a wasted opportunity. I think you should have been spending more, giving more, whatever it is. But on the flip side, and sounds like maybe you and your husband have a different opinion on this. On the flip side, if you spend, if your husband's like, okay, I was spending 70, now I want to spend 120 and spend every cent of that, maybe you're setting yourself up for never being able to retire, or having to live on Social Security when you retire and dropping your standard of living then. And so I do think it's important to like look at the options. And I'm obviously a big fan of retirement early and financial independence, and I think that brings a real sense of like freedom and joy, and you can quit your job if you want to and spend your time however you want. I think that is probably better than a new car for most people's quality of life, but that's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. So congratulations, you're crushing it. Sit together with your husband side by side, look at the calculator, make a little spreadsheet about how much you guys want to save, how much you want to spend, dream about what retirement would look like, make a bucket list. I literally have these spreadsheets too. I have a bucket list. What do we want to do in our lives? What year are we going to do it? And some suggested reading might be Die with Zero, a book that basically says, hey, in addition to this great compound growth that money has over time, there's this like decay curve that your health has over time. And if you say, hey, 1 year we're going to go, skydiving in Australia, you should probably do that like this year or like this decade at least. because, I'm 45. When I'm 55, maybe in my body's not going to feel the same about skydiving. And when I'm 65, it's getting really unlikely, right? And so, making a plan about spending your money purposefully so you're not the richest person in the cemetery, I think is an important part of making the most of money.
Nice. Love the audio question. Love the answer. Personalfinanceclub.com/ask.
Yes, I know. And look, if Jen spent all this time building a new landing page that shows you how to ask a question and how to upload it, and it's working now with these new audio questions. And so go be part of the conversation and thank Jen for her work building the website.
Thank you, Esmeralda. All right, let's get into Jeremy had time today.
I had time today. You're in the comments.
We're on Instagram. We're talking mortgages.
You tell me how dumb I am. And then I get to defend myself when you aren't around to defend yourself.
No one is ever as mean as I want them to be, but that's okay. It's a testament.
I don't know. I haven't been posting as much lately, but people used to someone called me a baby killer at one point.
Whoa.
Yeah. I think I posted something that was it was 3 levels of baby killing removed. It was something financial related that their litmus test took as that must mean I support Democratic candidates. Therefore, I support the current Democratic candidate. Therefore, I support, freedom of choice with relation to abortion. Therefore, I'm a baby killer.
That's a leap. That's a leap if I ever saw one.
I think it's a big leap. Personally, I really like babies. I have one. My baby dying would ruin.
Are you going to kill your
baby?
Life. That's really the hard-hitting questions we need to be asking on Can I Ask a Dumb One?
I would literally kill myself to save my baby's life in an instant.
Okay.
Either of my children in an instant, I would gladly lay my life down without question.
He's a father, y'all. Okay.
Daddy bear's back. All right. So anyway,
dead babies. We're talking about mortgages.
Yeah. Who's calling me a baby killer today? What do we got?
So you have an Instagram post here called Big Extra Payment. You've got David and Danielle. So why don't you tell us what we're seeing before we get into the comment section?
Yeah. So it says David and Danielle, and I had an English teacher yell at me. I used the wrong word. It should say each, but I wrote both, but it should say David and Danielle each have a 30-year, $500,000 mortgage with a 7% interest rate, which is pretty typical in this world. That's about what rates are. That's about what a big mortgage would be. They both receive a $100,000 inheritance. David loses his $100,000 day trading. That happens to some people. Danielle puts her $100,000 towards her mortgage. Both continue making the normal monthly payment of $3,326. Years later, David pays off his loan in 30 years and pays $700,000 in interest. Crazy. In interest. That's on top of the $500,000 he paid back, right? Danielle pays off her loan in 17 years and pays $300,000 in interest. And so basically, that one lump sum payment reduced Danielle's interest by $400,000. Putting $100,000 in saved her $400,000 in interest. And it was just, obviously it's not really a fair comparison because David, losing $100,000 day trading is worse than basically anything, other than maybe spending it on meth and developing a meth addiction or something.
What?
But the point is, if I don't mention meth at least once in each episode, Jen, then what are we even doing here at Personal Meth Club?
I mean, speaking of leaps, how do we get there?
Well, I'm just saying, what's the worst way you can spend your money? And David was right up there. But the point was just to show, hey, making a big lump sum towards your mortgage can have a massive impact on the interest you pay. And then this commenter said,
depends on your rate. Why would I rush to pay off a 2.5% mortgage when I could invest that money elsewhere?
Listen, anonymous commenter who can't defend him or herself, of course. Actually, this one could be a female. It was nice. The real jerky ones, I'm like, those are definitely men. This one was this one's a very nice comment.
Very soft.
First of all, I didn't say 2.5%. I said 7% in this example. But, to their point, they're 100% right. 100%. In fact, we're in a very weird moment in financial history right now where a lot of people do have very low rate mortgages, 3% or lower. And there are there are cash accounts, like a money market fund or even a high yield savings account, paying around 4% these days. And so, there is like a zero risk way to basically do this where you don't pay off your mortgage at all and make a little bit of money just on the interest arbitrage. You're paying 3% interest on your mortgage, you're earning 4% interest in your savings account. Mathematically, assuming that the savings account is FDIC insured and there's no risk about not paying it off, there's, no reason to pay off your mortgage. That's 100% right. They're totally right. And you don't need to put it in a savings account earning 4%. This person mentioned investing. Yeah, historically, the stock market returns about 10%. You could have a huge arbitrage. Instead of saying, I could make 1% more in interest, I could make maybe 7% more by getting 10% return on the market. Instead of 3%, I'm paying in interest. That's 100% right too. But there's always a big but. Here's the thing. If you don't want to do that, if you want to pay off your 2.5% mortgage, I give you permission. You don't need my permission. I'm just a recorded voice on your car on your commute to work or something like that. I give you permission. Because here's the thing. Like, let's say I had a $500,000 mortgage at 2.5%. I could do the math and figure out, okay, what can I make in a savings account or by investing? And investing involves some risk, and a savings account would be like just a little bit of money. Or I could just pay off the mortgage. And when I'm at a barbecue 3 months from now, it's summertime's coming up. We're going to have a summertime barbecue. And my neighbor comes over and he says, hey, how much mortgage you have left? I was like, oh, I paid it off a few months ago. I had a big bonus at work and we finally took care of it, sold some company stock, paid it off. He's going to be like, you dumb. You don't have a mortgage? You don't make any payments at all? You just get to live in this house for free and have a beautiful house, and every single dollar you make from work, you get to take home and spend it whatever you want, you big dumb.
Who is this guy?
He's a jerk. My neighbor's a huge jerk. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a multimillionaire. I don't have a mortgage. It's amazing. And I'm like, what's your net worth? He's like, my net worth is negative $50,000 because I day trade options on Robinhood and I arbitrage my mortgage to make more money. Could I have 2.3 million instead of 2.2 million if I, did some sort of arbitrage for my mortgage? Yeah, maybe. Would that make my life better? Probably not noticeably. Would paying your mortgage make your life better? Yeah, maybe noticeably. So here's the thing. If you are an Excel person and you want to arbitrage, by the way, I've been throwing this word arbitrage around a lot. It basically just means like paying a little bit here and earning a little bit here and making a little bit of money on the difference. If you want to do that, that's fine. And guess what? If you want to pay off your mortgage, that's fine too. And you can even lose a little bit of money paying off your mortgage these days if you have a super low mortgage. That's fine if you want to do it. And if you have a 7% mortgage, the math gets like way less convincing. For example, if this person's paying 7% and the market might return 10%, the mortgage is guaranteed 7%, the market's a maybe 10%, that's not a very good deal, right? Because the risk means you could actually get burned if it goes the other way and the market goes down by 20% and you're still paying the 7%. Now you're like negative 20% if you then versus paying it off, right? And so there's a risk factor there too. But, the person's mathematically totally right. And I think most people, frankly, should not be paying off their 2.5% mortgages very quickly. I probably wouldn't be because I'm an Excel person. But if you want to, like, honestly, you're probably a better person than I am. And you're going to, you're a neighbor who calls you a big dumb for not having a big mortgage. You'll be like, okay, cool, man. Here's another beer. I'm going to sleep like a baby when the bank's not like breathing down my neck tomorrow morning when I wake up. Like my life's good, right? It's not always about a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's about just what makes you happier in life.
A little peace of mind.
Yeah.
Also, they need to come up with a better insult than big dumb.
You big dumb.
That's
you
a
don't like
crazy
that
insult. It's like calling somebody a dweeb or something.
Yeah. He yells at me when I'm walking by. I assume no neighbors of mine even know what I do for a living, much less listen to this podcast. So
do you
if
talk
there
to
are
your neighbors?
This is a theoretical neighbor. All my neighbors seem extremely nice and we don't even talk about our work or anything. But but if I had this hypothetical neighbor call me a dum-dum, that'd be fine because I don't have a mortgage and
you sleep in the night.
Mortgage. My wife and I have this debate. I want to pay off the mortgage a little faster. She kind of likes having it around for, diversity reasons and things like that, or diversification reasons where you're not so heavily invested in one asset. And like, we're both right. There's no right or wrong. Yeah.
We'll get into that another episode.
I think I mentioned this on a previous episode. We did recently make a big lump sum payment towards our mortgage, and she saw how much it saves, and she's like, okay, that's actually pretty cool. Let's do it. And we did.
Oh, this is
Now we
real
have a
life,
slightly-
people.
Yeah, we have a slightly smaller mortgage.
Nice.
You going to Africa again soon, Jen?
My mom wants to go in for Christmas, but I don't know, man.
Oh, really? Oh, I was like, I thought
It's
that
a
was
bit of
gonna
a
be hard
grind.
deal.
I'm not gonna lie.
It's a long way away.
It's a
'Cause we
long,
were-
like I was in the air for 20 hours and it's like, there's like, I went to my cousins and like, when I went in 2012, it was like a constant power outage. So it's gotten a lot better, but like went to my cousins and power was like out for the night. They had brought like my other cousin's PS5 over. So it's like, we were just like, I guess we're chatting. Like, it's just like,
Wait, how'd
some
you
of
have a PS5 with no power?
well, we brought it over to play and we were playing for like an hour and then the power went out for like the night. So,
I thought that a PS5 had like a battery backup option. We were like,
oh, who even
we had no
knows?
lights, so we just reversed the electricity on the PS5, and it. I was like, ooh.
I don't even know. I'm not a gamer, but yeah, there's just some
Yeah.
creature comforts that I'm just like, I miss them when I'm not here.
Yeah, no, I know. I've gotten soft. I feel like in my 20s when I like traveled to like countries that aren't quite as modern as America, I'm like, no, this is fine. I'm like, no, I kind of like my memory foam topper on my mattress.
But my grandmother is 96 and she's still alive and she's still like beating me up. So I'm like, I should go see her more often.
Yeah, that's amazing. Cool. Well,
So anyway, we'll see.
we were absolutely dying without you for those.
You
almost
were
3 weeks.
not. I saw the chat. You guys were fine.
Something happened to one of the episodes. I had to do something. I forget what I had to do something.
Yeah, I saw you guys were like deleting episodes. I was like, oh my God, what's
Oh
going
yeah,
on over there?
Spotify had some bug where it did not fully publish or something, and I just think yeah.
Leave it to
See.
the one, like the couple weeks that I leave for that to happen. I was like, that's never happened before.
Exactly. We were dying. Maybe we did something wrong. I don't know. But I think, we probably lost something there, but whatever.
Like 10 listeners, 10
Yeah, exactly.
listens.
No one listens to the podcast anyway, so who cares? And if you're listening, thank you. I'm being kind of
you.
self-deprecating. It's a great, successful podcast, and you have many, many fellow listeners out there, I assume.
We're growing, okay?
Yes,
Hit us
we
with
are
the
growing.
rules. Let's get out of here.
And and tell your friends if they want to become a millionaire like you're going to become because you're listening to the Personal Finance Club, you know how you do it? You follow the 2 rules of Personal Finance Club. Rule number 1, live below your means. And rule number 2, invest early and often. See you next week.
The Personal Finance Club show is produced by Jeremy Schneider and Jen Mundia. Music by Esabalu and Homie. Send your questions to podcast@personalfinanceclub.com. The Personal Finance Club show is co-hosted by Jeremy Schneider, who is a co-owner of Nectarine, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The views expressed on this show are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nectarine. Please refer to hellonectarine.com for all relevant disclosures. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any security. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, or tax professionals for advice specific to their situation.